Limitation often serves as a catalyst for innovation, a lesson profoundly evident in Japan's remarkable journey in space exploration. From launching the smallest orbital rockets to operating the most advanced research laboratory in space and planning for asteroid mining, Japan has forged a unique path through decades of interstellar innovation. This is the story of Japanese space exploration. The Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, JXO, as we know it today, was established in 2003. However, Japan's involvement in space exploration dates back to the mid-1950s. Prior to JAXA, there were three separate Japanese space programs: the Institute of Space and Astronautical Science, ISAS, the National Aerospace Laboratory of Japan, NOL, and the National Space Development Agency of Japan, NASDA. These institutions merged in 2003 to secure more concentrated funding from the Japanese government and to centralize and organize space exploration efforts. To understand Japan's journey in space exploration, we must start in post-World War II Japan. As part of their submission to the United States, Japan was prohibited from developing any new technology that could be associated with military use, which included most space exploration technologies. Despite this limitation, Japan pressed forward in its own way, and by the mid-1950s, the beginnings of a space research program were in place. The Institute of Space and Astronautical Science started as a research group from the Institute of Industrial Science at the University of Tokyo. This group was led by Hideo Itokawa, a man considered the father of Japan's space development by Japanese media. At the same time, the global political landscape was changing rapidly. The United States, increasingly concerned about the nuclear threat posed by the Soviet Union, amended Japan's military restrictions to allow for self-defense armed forces. However, Japan was still prohibited from developing offensive weapons technology, meaning they couldn't create ballistic missiles but could develop unguided rockets. This restriction led the Institute of Space and Astronautical Science to focus on developing miniature solid-fueled rockets. Their first design, known as the pencil rocket, was just 1.8 centimeters in diameter and 23 centimeters in length. Though small, this rocket marked Japan's first step towards space exploration. Next came the baby rocket, which, though larger than the pencil rocket at 8 centimeters in diameter and 120 centimeters in length, still paled in comparison to its contemporaries. Nonetheless, it could carry scientific instruments into the sky, marking another crucial step forward. The development of the Kappa series of sounding rockets soon followed. These solid-fueled rockets were designed to probe the upper regions of Earth's atmosphere with target altitudes between 60 and 100 kilometers. Despite initial setbacks with many early models exploding on ignition, the first successful design, the Kappa 6, reached an altitude of 60 kilometers in 1958. The Kappa 8, a two-stage sounding rocket, later achieved an altitude of 160 kilometers in September 1960, carrying a scientific payload into outer space and taking the first ever density measurement of the Earth's ionosphere. As the space race of the 1960s intensified, with the American and Soviet programs focused on manned spaceflight and satellite deployment, Japan embraced the limitations of its space program by concentrating on scientific research and atmospheric observation. This led to the development of the Lambda series of rockets, essentially scaled-up versions of the Kappa rockets. The Lambda rockets were less than 1 meter wide and around 16 meters long, capable of reaching high altitudes and deploying payloads into Earth orbit. By 1965, a Lambda 3 rocket had reached beyond 1,000 kilometers in altitude, and in 1966, the Lambda 4S was prepared for Japan's first satellite deployment attempt. A notable peculiarity of Japanese rocket launches was their diagonal launch trajectory. Unlike the Soviets and Americans, who launched their rockets vertically, Japan's post-war constitution prohibited offensive weapon technology, including guidance systems for rockets. Thus, Japanese engineers compensated by launching rockets diagonally from the ground, allowing them to achieve the same arch trajectory naturally. At high altitudes, where the atmosphere thinned and the Lambda's side fins became ineffective, a system fired to spin the rocket at 2 rotations per second. This keeps the rocket stable throughout its flight. By adjusting the rate of rotation, the rocket payload can be maneuvered for orbital insertion. However, the journey wasn't easy for the Japanese space program. It took 4 failed attempts before they successfully deployed a satellite. Finally, in 1970, Japan achieved orbit with a 24 kilograms satellite payload named Osumi, becoming the 4th nation to do so after after the Soviet Union, the United States, and France. Unlike the Soviet Union and the United States, Japan's disassociation from the cutthroat competition of the space race allowed it to focus entirely on space science and research. Over the following decades, Japanese scientists made significant strides in atmospheric science, weather and climate patterns, magnetic fields, and X-ray astronomy. These missions were powered by the M series of orbital rockets, essentially scaled-up versions of the early solid propellant-sounding rockets, and still launched at an angle. The 1980s brought a new wave of accomplishments for Japan's space program. Sakigake, Pathfinder, and its twin vehicle, Suisei, Comet, were Japan's first spacecraft to escape Earth's gravity. Launched in 1985, they were the first deep space probes deployed by any country other than the USA or the Soviet Union. These probes were part of a fleet of spacecraft studying Halley's Comet as it passed through the inner solar system in 1986. The early 1990s, often referred to as the lost decade due to economic struggles, saw Japan's space program make a significant comeback with the International Space Station (ISS) project. Japan made the largest contribution to the ISS after the United States and Russia with the Kibo HOPE module. This three-part research outpost is the largest and most advanced scientific laboratory in space. The main pressurized module houses 10 scientific experiment racks used for studying cell biology in microgravity, space environments, atmospheric composition, weather patterns, cosmic rays, and laser communications. Kibo also features a logistics module for storage in an exposed facility known as the terrace, where experiments are placed outside the main module to be exposed to space. These experiments can be managed by Kibo's 10-meter robotic arm system or by astronauts via an airlock that allows for spacewalks onto the terrace. Kibo can also deploy small CubeSats, enabling instruments to be shipped to the ISS and launched into orbit from there. Another significant yet often unsung contribution by Japan to the ISS was the HTV supply ship. Capable of carrying over 5 metric tons of pressurized cargo and 1 ton of unpressurized cargo, the HTV was frequently used to remove up to 6 tons of waste from the ISS. The HTV was launched using a new rocket from JAXA, the H-2. This liquid hydrogen-fueled medium-lift vehicle, designed and manufactured in Japan by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, had the highest power-to-weight ratio of any orbital rocket and launched pointing straight up. You've probably heard that the first trillionaire will be the person who figures out how to mine an asteroid. If there's any leader in the field of extracting resources from asteroids, it's Japan. Embracing their limitations, Japan chose not to pursue crewed spaceflight, Mars rovers, or moon bases. Instead, they leveraged their significant expertise in robotics for their space program. The Hayabusa Peregrine Falcon mission was the first to touch an asteroid and return home with a sample. Launched in 2005 on a Japanese M-series rocket, it traveled to the near-Earth asteroid Itokawa, collected a dust sample, and returned to Earth in 2010. Although it failed to deploy its secondary robotic lander, Minerva, due to the asteroid's weak gravity, it was a pioneering mission. In 2014, Japan launched the Hayabusa 2 mission to the near-Earth asteroid Ryugu, a carbonaceous asteroid preserving ancient material from the solar system's formation. This mission successfully retrieved surface material and deployed the Minerva 2 payload, which carried 2 robots named Haibu and Owl. These robots hopped around the asteroid's surface by rotating a mass inside their bodies to combat the low gravity, and they captured the first-ever pictures from the surface of an asteroid. Looking ahead, Japan plans to leverage their asteroid sample technology for the first touchdown and return mission from Phobos, one of Mars's moons. Scheduled for 2026, the Martian Moon's Exploration, MMX, robotic space probe will land on Phobos to collect at least 10 grams of sample material and then move to Mars's second moon, Deimos, for orbital observation. The return module is expected to arrive back on Earth by 2031. While not as extensive as NASA's Mars Sample Return mission, Japan's proven effectiveness and efficiency suggest a high likelihood of success. Japan's approach to space exploration isn't about being the biggest or the best. It's about being effective, prioritizing science and discovery over national prestige